All right, well, welcome everyone to our, this is like our fourth meeting. I've lost track, but we've been learning a lot from our various guests who've been sharing a lot of good information about the programs and services that we already have going on in Evanston to help respond to residents when they are having troubles. And we're looking forward to learning how the youth and young adult program fits into the bigger picture and how it could be integrated with the alternative emergency system that we're working on developing. So Audrey, shall I turn it over to you to kind of give us an overview of youth and young adult program? And we're particularly interested in how, because what our focus is, how do we respond to residents in the moment of crisis? And so I guess we're interested in knowing how your program takes care of people in similar kinds of situations.
Sure. So first, I think I'm going to defer to Mr. Norman. Okay. Really, there are 4 ways that we engage young people. And so he's just going to give a little background about those, and then we can fill in the pieces of the puzzle. Traditionally, there is no formal process by which if someone is in need, they call us, from the police. That's just, we have a relationship with the police department, in that a lot of times if there is some concern about a young person, they will call one of the outreach workers, directly. We are not an extension of the police department, so I want to just make sure that, everybody understands that. Right. However, I think Nathan says it best when he says, like, we're the people you want to see before you have communications with, the police department. However, there have been times where, Chief Cook has reached out to Nathan or Jeremy or Stacy, Gennaro, and just said, hey, we've got a young person that's struggling here, and we feel like they could use the services, of the Youth and Young Adult Division, and we jump right to it. Another part of that is that we are directly involved now with the administrative hearings. So when young people are given a ticket and are sent to the youth administrative hearings, we are now creating the community engagement plans and doing the assessments and walking them through that. In addition to that, we are just ensuring that if young people don't show up to court, and they don't show up to the hearing sometimes, that with the parents' permission, we are able to engage with the young person by assigning specifically an outreach worker to that young person. So I think there are so many pieces of the puzzle that there is no one size fits all. Right. And so it really depends on the young person. And it also depends on the family. While we're not considered family services, a lot of times it's a matter of working with the entire family. And so when we're talking about alternatives to calling 911, I think we've got to kind of just process that a little bit, because right now we are not being called directly. And I don't know that anybody's being called directly. That's why we're having these conversations. But we've got to kind of iron out what that looks like. But I'm going to let Nathan talk a little bit about like the 4 ways that we engage young people and what some of those examples are.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Audrey. How you doing, Alderman Revelle and everyone here on the committee? So first off, my name is Nathan Norman, and I am a supervisor in the Youth and Young Adult Division. I oversee the Mayor's Summer Youth and Employment Program, which is one of the biggest forms of outreach that we do in the Youth and Young Adult Division and the City of Evanston as a whole. But the 4 components that Ms. Thompson was referring to is civic engagement, workforce development, education, and alternative recreation. And traditionally, our division has used these avenues to approach young people. And when we talk about alternative recreation, 3 years ago, we started the middle school dance for the young people so that they have a safe place to come and express themselves, have fun, have food, and meet friends. We did that at Fleetwood Jordan Community Center for the young people because they had expressed this. One of the things in outreach that we learned is that we don't push on the clients or the individuals we meet out in the community what we think is best for them. We meet them where they're at. We ask them, how can we serve you? How can we help you? How can we help you reach your fullest potential? And again, we use these 4 avenues to achieve those goals in developing young people. Another thing is when we talk about civic engagement, each outreach worker is tasked with maintaining a caseload of 15 at-risk clients. And we talk about at-risk, we're talking about young people or young adults who have housing insecurities, young adults who may have been justice involved, young adults who just need some sort of mentorship or different outlets, or just need to be connected with some sort of resources that they probably didn't know existed. And outreach workers are a catalyst to help them achieve those goals or connect them to those resources. We talk about workforce development. We do that in conjunction with the Youth Job Center. We've had an impactful program for over the last 8 years, almost going on a decade, where we've helped Evanston residents ages 18 through 26 get into career paths from manufacturing, healthcare, construction, culinary, automotive programs, so on and so forth. And so these are just a few of examples and a few ways that we engage young adults and youth in our city. But I think it's also worthy of note that it's this division's highest priority to support Evanston youth and link them to resources. I often say, as Audrey pointed out, that we're the individuals you want to see before you have a negative interaction with law enforcement. We want to make sure that you have the support and the things that you need, so that if you do happen to have a altercation with law enforcement, we're here to help you. We're here to present you with some resources that could change the trajectory of that young person's life. And again, I appreciate the fact that we have a division that's dedicated to supporting young people and helping them reach their goals. So that's just a brief overview of what the division does. We encompass so much more, but those are just a few of the ways in which we work with young people. And again, that may be on the street corner, that may be on a basketball court, that may be through an enrichment activity, that may come by way of law enforcement saying, hey, I think this is a young man or a young lady who deserves a second chance, a third or fourth or fifth chance. And we understand that all too well in the youth division, that we have to be patient with the young people, and we have to provide them with resources, and we have to make sure that they understand that people from their community cares and supports them. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Alderman Ravel, if I can just provide a couple of examples of how we have worked with the police department. Just recently, there were news articles that went out about young people on the top of the roofs. Some of them were tight roping, some of them were riding skateboards, and some of them, just mischievous behavior, going to the 7-Eleven, getting snacks, and then going up on the roof, and some of them even smoking marijuana. And so we were contacted about that, but the police were also contacted. And the last thing you want to do is scare a young person who's on a roof. And so we just made it one of our stops. There are several stops that we make every day to certain places where we know young people hang out. And so we made this one of the stops. And yes, we've even, really caught young people on roofs and been able to have conversations with them. And so I think it's, hey, I know this seems like a really fun thing to do, but what are some alternatives to this kind of fun? And then providing them with those opportunities. In the past, we've had, and just recently, when, the police have called us and said, hey, we've got, some young people are having some difficulties getting along, and we fear this could, kind of get out of hand. So can we do a circle? So we do, circles that allow people to express themselves and then to find out what can be done so that those individuals can get along better, so it doesn't lead to, violence. So the police have called us and said, hey, I think the Youth and Young Adult Division will be really great in helping to, provide a bridge so, nothing, more violent will happen, in the future. So there are just times when the police department will call us to come and assist. But again, I just want to make this really clear that we are not a part of the police department. And I think it gets really sticky if young people believe that we are a part of the police. We want to be able to offer them opportunities. So if a young person is maybe participating in, selling drugs, we want to, if there's an opportunity, we need to have several of them available at our fingertips. So we can say, right now, I have a job opportunity. I can take you there tomorrow at 9 a.m. And so those are the opportunities that we have, but we do need more of those. And so I think, that's a part of like some of the opportunities that we do provide, and we need to continue to provide for young people. But recreational stuff too, not just getting a job, but fun activities as well.
Hey, Ms. Thompson, may I just say one last thing too, that I forgot to include, and that was how our division supports reentering citizens. I think that that's very, very important to address here as well, is that because we have individuals coming back who are recently incarcerated to our community, and the division has supports in place to support those individuals, whether it be helping them find a job opportunity, whether it be helping connect them to some resources to get them back acclimated into society, as well as if a person has been in the community for an extended period of time, we have linked with the Moran Center to be able to help them clear some of their background and get those things deleted so that they're more marketable for employment opportunities and housing and other things like that. So I think that's also worthy to address as well. And just lastly, I want to say is that people think of outreach like, oh, they interact with only the at-risk population, or they only interact with, this sort of demographic. But we also have so many services that support individuals that are on the right path. Me and Mr. McCray, we met many times with the varsity basketball team to support them and help individuals who are on the right track to provide more support to those individuals as well. Ms. Thompson just implemented in the last MSYEP the MSYEP that just passed to help address individuals taking the non-traditional path, so that we had options for students who are graduating from ETHS that say, hey, I don't feel college is for me, or I want to give the trades a try first. We put things into place that addresses those things, and those are some of the things that I believe Ms. Thompson is also saying that we need to enhance and focus in more. Thank you.
Right, no, that's great, thanks. So, committee, do you have any specific questions to start our conversation here? And Cicely, you're able to hear us okay?
I can hear, yes, I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay.
Go ahead, my next question.
Oh, I did have a question for the young man, for Nathan, about the reentry efforts. With your agency, is that strictly for youthful offenders, or would it be for adults as well who were recently incarcerated, just coming on?
That's a great question. Thank you, Mr. Burnett. And no, that is not just specific to young youth. That is for any individuals that are any age. Our only requirement is that you are an Evanston resident, and we'll work with you. Ms. Thompson also alluded to this earlier, is that our program has evolved into a family services. So yes, that is appropriate for all ages. Thank you for your question.
Yeah. And Cicely, were you about to ask a question as well?
Yeah, thank you, Alderman Ravel, for leading the meeting. Yeah, so if whoever from Youth and Young Adult, if you all can talk a little bit more, I know, the separation between you and the police, but for the committee, what do you all see are maybe some missing components? Audrey, I know you spoke about activities, but if we have this kind of alternative response unit that goes out to respond to a variety of things, what other kind of needs, even as you're working with, older adults, do you think that we should, if there were some resources we could make available, what would those be? And then if you have some ideas on the type of skills that you find most valuable when you're interacting with people that we should be thinking about in this new program model.
I can start. So a part of the alternatives to 911 or emergency response is really that we're covered during the day. Like we work, and some of our outreach workers work to 7, 8 o'clock at night. It just depends on what's happening. But I do find that there's a challenge in response well after hours. And I mean, even past 5 o'clock, if they're like right now, if Chief Cook called and said, hey, we just got a call that the kids are on the roof again. Can someone go by there? If that's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, hey, we just take a ride. But if that is 1 o'clock in the morning, then that becomes more of a challenge because our outreach workers are not emergency responders. And so they would not, they're not on call at this point to respond to those types of, calls that would be received. So I think that that's a huge part of, what types of calls would our division be, asked to respond to well after hours. And some of this could mean that we just change hours, like there's someone who works a different shift so that there are times that they could respond after 5 o'clock. But I think that's going to be the challenge because we're here all the time. And even though we're in a pandemic, like I'm sitting in the office right now, Gennaro's in the office with me. Jeremy is behind me with his mask. When he starts talking, I will put my mask on. But, we're at work. Nathan comes to, he's at home today, but most of the time he's in the city as well. So we have not been at home. So we're still in the community, but we could use more of that. Like, right now I have a part-time outreach worker position that's open at the city. The position will close, so we'll have another outreach worker. I have a youth and family advocate position that's also posted and will close on the 23rd. So it's just a matter of us trying to figure out the after hours piece of this. And right now, that is where I feel we need to have some direction. But we also want to say that if it's a matter of like people being on call, it's, I know Indira will tell you that that's an added expense because whether a person is ever called at 1 o'clock at night, we still have to pay them if they're on call. So I think, I think that's just a part of, and if a young person is out somewhere at 1 o'clock, I think we need to have the information as to what's going on so we also don't put the outreach workers in harm's way. So I think we got to have some really clear direction about that.
So have you ever had outreach workers on sort of these different shifts, or it's always been sort of regular hours?
It's really been, and Nathan, I know you've been here in this division a lot longer, but my understanding is that we've never been on call. But that's kind of strange because if someone calls us, we do respond, but it's not a formal, official, you're on call during this time. Because, when people are on call, there are certain things that they just shouldn't do. I shouldn't have an adult beverage, even though I'm grown. I shouldn't have an adult beverage if I'm on call.
Sure.
And so there are certain things that we're asking people not to do and to really be on alert that they could be called at any time. So that has never been formal to my understanding with youth and young adult or any of our departments that I'm aware of as far as the response for emergencies.
Right, but alternative to being on call would be actually having a shift that was like 3 p.m. to whatever. So has that ever been tried? Because I guess somehow I kind of think that, because I envision, 7 p.m. might be a prime time for needing an outreach worker.
Right.
But that's not ever been part of the way you've been structured.
Not to 11 o'clock. Now we do have one-on-one meetings 7, 8 o'clock at night. So we schedule it based on the family's schedule. But when it comes to more of the alternatives to calling 911, that's a little different because we're scheduling. And so we're able to have the outreach workers flex their time. So, I know I'm going to do a home visit at 8 o'clock tonight. So maybe I don't come in until 11 that day, or I leave early on Friday. But it hasn't been that there is an actual shift that they don't even start until 3. And then for those, 8 to 11 hours, they're kind of just on standby. That has not been the case in the past.
Okay.
And part of that scheduling is what we're working through. I mean, we've talked about whether, everybody's kind of working and rotating on call, something like victim services, or if, one person's daytime and 2 people are overnight, so we're kind of working through that, trying to figure out what the need is. So we looked at the police calls and when they're heavy and all that. And then, so the other part in terms of, maybe we already know this, but kind of what are the skill sets that you think, right, these people are going to encounter all kind of different calls. So I realize it's all different kind of skills maybe, but what do you guys think has been most helpful as you're engaging people?
Oh my goodness, humanness. Because, I know that people will always say, hey, it needs to be a social worker. Well, I'm the only social worker here, but I have very capable and qualified. They're all, if you've ever seen them interact with a person, and they're not social workers. So I won't say that it has to be a social worker, but a level of professionalism, a level of being able to meet the young person or the family member wherever they are, being non-judgmental, being available. So those are all skills that sometimes education might not teach you. And so I think that we have to look at backgrounds. Like, when, right now, when we're looking, I don't look at these resumes by myself, and I don't interview the team by myself. We interview together because we need to, like, I may not catch something that Nathan or Jeremy may catch. And so when we're looking at, what types of interactions, like based on their resume, how have they been interacting, because we have to be able to be professional, but also be able to meet them where they are and not make them feel lower. So I think that that's a skill that all people don't possess.
Nathan, any comments from you on that question?
What was the question again? I'm so sorry.
About what kind of special skills or training or background do you think is particularly helpful?
For outreach staff?
Right.
Well, again, I think Audrey was right on point when she talked about the tacit knowledge. That's something that can't be taught, and people that bring a wealth of empirical knowledge as well, I think is always helpful. I also think that you have to have individuals who are close to the plight of what, or face some of the similarities in their life that the people that they're serving are up against. And I only say that because oftentimes individuals that you try to help, they won't take you serious if they feel like you're coming from a textbook approach. They want individuals that they can truly identify with. I speak to young individuals about being incarcerated as a juvenile because I was incarcerated as a juvenile. But I also share with them that it was nothing gratifying about that. But I share with them the knowledge and the experience that I took away from that. You know what I'm saying? So when we talk about the adjudication court and the process of working with these young individuals, I truly share the plight, and I'm also able to be a tangible example at the same time of what you can do when you want to, change the trajectory of your life. So I think it's extremely important. That's why in undergrad I wanted to do child advocacy, because I think possessing both formal and empirical knowledge is helpful. And so as Audrey suggested, when we look for individuals to work alongside of us, we look for individuals who can definitely speak to the plight of the people. We think that that's very important.
A couple of more things, Alderman Ravel, that really come to mind is more of like the whole trauma informed. There are just certain ways that we have to approach individuals. If someone has delusions, the worst thing that you could do is to argue with them that their delusions are not correct. So, DC Barnes and I have gone out on calls together, and, part of that is just relationship building, because if people can't trust you, then there's really you have a really difficult time being able to, to proceed at all with them if they can't really trust you. So more of like trauma and what that means and how it affects individual. And these are, if a person has, some of the other characteristics that we've talked about that you can't really teach, then these are other trainings that we can equip them with. They need to understand restorative justice does exist, and we have to make sure that there's a platform for that in Evanston, which that's what we're doing with our Alternatives to Arrest Committee. And so, when we're talking about restorative justice, it's about how do you repair harm that's been caused, and then, moving past that so that people feel engaged and a part of their community. And so I think those are things that we can teach, young people, and families and people overall. And so I think more resources are always beneficial, because if we can offer those, then we decrease the violence that we're seeing, But as far as, again, I want to get back to what you were asking, Alderman Ravel, about, past the skill set, the timing. And a part of that could be that we do flex, our time. If there are events that are going on, or there's a heightened time where we know that there's, violence that's occurring, it doesn't do really good for us to work 8 to 5, so it may mean that we have to work 12 to 9, or, but I'm more concerned, because that's an easy fix for us to flex the time. I'm sure they'd like to sleep in a little later and come in later, so that's an easy fix. I think I'm more concerned about those things that happen at 1 o'clock in the morning, at 2 o'clock, that would be appropriate for a youth and a youth outreach advocate to assist with. So that's what I'm, more concerned with.
So for that, we really need more workers, outreach workers.
For those that can, those that can be on call, like how it can be rotated. And I will say that maybe it's not just outreach workers. Maybe you have a variety of people who are responding, and they are your after hours team that's responding to a plethora of different things that come in. And not just, they're outreach workers, but if people are trained, like you have those fundamental characteristics, but then you train them on all types of different things, then those individuals can be the ones that are responding at these hours. You all know, I've been with seniors for a very long time, and one of the highest number of calls that you all are receiving is well-being checks.
Right.
Do you know how many well-being checks I have gone out on my own with no police?
Mhm.
I just knock on the door and have no idea of what I'm walking into, but I try to get as much information from the caller as I can get, and that helps me make some decisions. But I'm also have all of my 5 senses working for me when I'm walking up to the house or the apartment. All my antennas are up, so if there is ever a need that I feel I need to call, backup.
Mhm.
And you have to have training to say, hey, I'm a team member, I'm going to this home. If I don't call you back in 30 minutes, that's all training. And so I think that if we had a team of those types of individuals, I think it would be better than just saying, if it's a young person, have them on call. That's just too expensive.
Okay.
That's too expensive.
Right. So when you go to those well-being calls, have you heard from 911 and that's why you go, or you've heard from some other source that a checkup is needed?
So most times it's from the fire department.
Oh.
In the past, it's been from the fire department.
Mhm.
So they are aware of a situation, and many times they have responded, and they'll call me and say, something's really off. Are you able to make a visit? And I make a visit.
Okay.
And so that's a part of that, is making sure we are plugging them into resources.
Mhm.
If it's an older adult who can't take care of themselves, the first thing that they think is you're going to put them in a nursing home. But there are other options to help them in the home. So it has to be someone who's not just ready to pull the Adult Protective Services trigger.
Right. Right.
Like, what other resources can be provided and are paid for through the state and federal government?
Mhm.
So again, this is a team of people who will be working in this effort, but the follow-up is very important for contacting the youth and young adult outreach workers or the ombudsman or different people who are working in those particular areas 9 to 5 every day we're in it, so that after hours, that group of people say, hey, this is what I responded to last night, but I think it needs further follow-up from your full team. So then that's when it's sent over to youth and young adult, because that team at night may be another person who's responding to a young person.
Mhm.
But our team would follow up the next day.
Got it. Right. Okay. Yeah, because I think follow-up the next day and beyond is a really
And beyond.
important part of what we're thinking about for this new alternative response program, that it's more than just helping the person in the crisis at that moment. It's really, continuing with that person to get them on the right track.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Questions from, yes, please go ahead. Yep.
Question, just
Angela.
you mentioned like well-being checks and kids on a rooftop. What other kinds of calls might you receive that would be, or I know it's not coming to you directly from 911, but something that theoretically might have started as a 911 call that you might be able to help with? What category?
Gennaro just had one 2 weeks ago, and there was how old was he panhandling?
He was 11 years old.
11 years old, panhandling. I mean, and he was in front of a store, and he was with someone that Gennaro felt was really sketchy. Okay. Now, that's someone would call the police in that particular situation. But Gennaro was able to pull him to the side, and he was hungry. So he bought him some food. Those types of, and then he followed up with him. And so we've been trying to kind of put the pieces of the puzzle of his story together, and some of those don't fit, and he was not fully truthful, but it's just the follow-up that Gennaro has been trying to find out who he is, find out who his parents are. He knows what he looks like, So, but that would have been a young person, and the police would have been called on him, So I think, and that was really not a police call, because he was just in the neighborhood and he noticed and recognized that something was off kilter, So I think you know, and that's just one. Do y'all want to give some? I can go on for days. You know, I can.
I mean, I would say this a recent call. Hey guys, this is Jeremy. Sorry, I'm not on my own computer. I've been in the community all day, so I'm with Audrey. But I would say just another call. Officer Adam Howard gave me a call about a week ago about some neighbors that was having issues and having troubles with each other, and it kind of got out of hand. And we're going to do kind of like a restorative justice kind of circle with both of the neighbors to see how we can resolve things and how we can make things better moving forward. And this will actually take place this Thursday, and we're going to see obviously how it goes. But you know, that those are some of the things that we're getting calls about. You know, Adam Harry's like, hey, I want you guys just to try to bring these two individuals together, try to see how we can help move forward, because they both have to stay there. Their lease is not up for an hour, so the lease is not up for a whole another year, so we have to figure out a resolution. And the resolution is going to be, hey, you guys both have to be there. Let's figure out a way to, you know, what's the issues, figuring out what's the common core issues, getting to the bottom of it, and you know, making it livable for both residents. So that's the instinct that literally we're going to be dealing with this week, this Thursday coming up.
Another example is just recently, well, a couple of months ago, there were a lot of phone calls that went to the police about connections for the homeless. And I know that there was some concern about, you know, connections using youth and outreach as an extension of staff. And so there were many fights, verbal altercations that were happening because there were individuals who were lined up because connections did not open until, I believe it was 9:30. And so we had outreach workers to kind of just make it one of their stops. So they would go there the morning and they were able to diffuse a lot of situations. I mean, fights, verbal altercations. They were able to ask them to go down to the park just so that there would not be a whole lot of traffic. And, you know, and let's just be honest, the neighbors were uncomfortable with so many homeless residents being in the street. Some of them had lawn chairs. They put it in places and they were like, this is our neighborhood. And so then when you have neighbors being upset and talking down to, then it becomes this distraction that becomes a bigger issue. So just having outreach there, because they knew the people there. And so when Stacy said, hey, come on, let's walk for a little bit. Let's just walk down to the park. They were more agreeable to that than having a neighbor come and say, you don't belong here, you need to go somewhere else. So we did that for a few weeks until they could open up the second location on Chicago Avenue, because everybody was at the Dewey location. That was a problem. So when they opened it up October 1 to go to Dewey, we pulled back our services. But for those few weeks, we were there every day. And it diffused a lot of situations that could have turned out for the worse. And sometimes just calling the police when it's a simple verbal altercation that could be larger, but having police present sometimes makes it even worse. So just having our outreach workers in plain clothes, they know if something gets way out of hand that they need to call law enforcement, but just having their presence there just made it a more calming atmosphere. And we were able to get clients from that. And we were able to send young people who were there to the Robert Crown, like Robert Crown Community Center. We reopened our runaway and homeless youth drop-in center there 2 months ago. So, you know, we would say, hey, you know that there's a runaway, there's a drop-in center at the Robert Crown. You can take a shower. We have hearty snacks for them. And it's a backpack with everything they need to take a shower, their grooming supplies, all of that. So we were saying, you don't have to be here every day. You can go to Robert Crown and take a shower there. And then we followed up with them, and some of them we got jobs, and some of them we got housing. We had another young person who was living in her car, so she would have to find places to park. So y'all can just imagine what would happen if the police were called. They outside? They're, okay. So they were, so, you know, just calling the police saying, hey, there's somebody living in their car. Well, that young lady is no longer living in her car. She has her own apartment. And that's because of our outreach workers. So it's, you know, those are like the success stories. And I have to tell y'all, we are not always successful. And sometimes we leave and we hang our heads in shame because we feel like there was something else that we could have done. But, you know, I have to say that these folks still come to work again and again every day, and we try it all over again. And that's what being an outreach worker is all about.
Really impressive. Other questions from the committee?
Well, I would just say that, I guess in my vision, this is a complementary program, right? I mean, they're gonna probably encounter some of the same people you are encountering, and then some different people. And, you know, I imagine that, you know, hopefully using Apricot or whatever system is used now at the city, you all are working together, you know, to make sure we have less gaps. I mean, I realize we are not a social service agency, so we can't provide everything that people need, but I see this. Oh, okay. I see this as something that we can all, you know, this department will complement, you all will complement the police. And so we're just providing that much more service to people in the community. So when you're talking about, Audrey, you know, successes and some not successes and lacks and coverages and space, excuse me, not space, but hours, hopefully we can navigate that so that this helps that. So whether you have outreach or overnight, or you know, start some new rotation of scheduling, hopefully we can work with you as we design this program to make sure we can, to the best of our ability, cover those times at 1 in the morning when you might not be available. But in the morning when you do get in, someone can leave you a note or email or whatever saying, hey, we encountered this person, you know, can you follow up? So it's a joint effort. Because I think as we come out of this pandemic, whenever that is, we know that the needs are going to be so high for so many people. And so the more people we can have out on the streets making connections, you know, as a city, between the city staff and all the partners we have in the community, hopefully that's just going to provide more support to our residents.
Okay, committee. Thoughts or questions? Maureen?
Yeah, this is Maureen Mcdonald from Peer Services. I just really want to thank you all for what you do and for what you shared today. It's, you know, one of the things that we've been struggling with in these discussions is how do we not just move the crisis further down the road? You know, by providing an alternative 911 response is one thing, but helping someone actually settle down what's going on in their lives is another. You know, and I appreciate the way you approach it and the way you talk about it, you know, is really what it feels to me like is very much needed. And I know I speak on behalf of other human service providers. Like, we just want to be as supportive as we can of what you do, because, you know, none of us have enough resources to go around. But I think in this context, you provide a window into this situation that's really valuable. And one of the things I learned from a couple sessions ago, we had an extensive conversation about dispatch and how cases are dispatched. And one of the things that really stuck with me is that when the police are called, the first thing the police have to do is determine whether a crime has been committed. And so I appreciate the number of times when, you know, they take a different approach, right? But it is sort of like, there's the legal responsibility the police have, there's the legal responsibility the fire department has, and we can't just say we're not going to do that, right? And so figuring out the right way to have response called out is also a big part of this. And I just wonder, given how you all approach cases, if you have any thoughts about that or any advice for this group as we try to figure that out.
Why not take a crack at that, Audrey?
I mean, I own, I can't hear.
Yeah, go ahead, Maureen.
No, I was just going to say, it looks like Audrey's still on mute, but I was just going to say that I know it's a hard question. That's why we're wrestling with it. And I don't know how to clarify the question anymore either. Sorry.
So can you clarify, you said, just clarify your question just a little bit more, because there was a lot in there.
Yeah, no, and I apologize for
No,
that. I think I was talking out loud, thinking out loud while talking a little bit. So one of the challenges, it seems like, is, you know, because if we're looking at alternative 911 response, that means calls are coming to 911, right? And then they have to be appropriately dispatched. And one of the things we've been struggling with is like, how would we sort of separate cases that really need a police response from cases that maybe really don't? And it seems like you all think about that literally every time you go out the door. So I just wondered kind of what advice you might have about as we try to wrestle with this.
So a part of this is, okay, and I'm gonna go out on a limb here. A part of this is that we do have to have some paradigm shift in how calls are being received, and also why people are calling the police. You know, people are saying the police, they're harassing me, but they're calling the police, you know? And so I think a large part of this has to be a huge campaign for the city about education. And so when we're looking at when we actually go out, I think if a crime has been committed, and that is the clear definition and why the person is calling 911, I feel we have no choice. However, if there are other, so for example, we were provided information that a young person had a warrant for stealing cars in another jurisdiction. Well, of course, that's straight up an arrestable offense, okay? We were able to work with that young person and help him turn himself in the other municipality. Now, there has to be follow-up with that young person as to, can we get you not to keep stealing cars? Like, where is this gonna lead? You're gonna try to rob somebody for their car one day, and it's not just gonna be you being arrested. They're gonna have a gun and they're gonna shoot you. So what other alternatives can we discuss when it comes to that? So really, we could have just contacted the police when we knew right then that that young person had this issue. But we worked with him to get him to turn himself in. And we work with his parent as well. So those are examples when we're just talking about, like, when do you call the police? You know, but when it's clearly a crime for the 911, you got to call the police and they have to respond. But y'all, there are so many, like, you know, those Northwestern students who laid out the presentation about what calls are being, you know, given to 911, wellness checks, you know, that's a huge part of the calls that 911 receives. Right. Like, there should just be some other alternative. Mm-hmm. You know, so if you could take those off, you got a lot of calls being taken off of EPD right then. Right. No matter what time it is. Mm-hmm. So that's why I say there's got to be a team. And I think we've got to decide how much money we have and what that team looks like. But the team that's answering or responding to those calls are really not going to be the same people who are following up and providing a long-range plan for how this person won't continue to call. Because sometimes the calls are, sometimes I get calls because the police say, these people keep calling the police over and over and over again. There has to be some mental health issue. So in that aspect, that's when we call in Amita Health. We have a 24-hour hotline, you know, when there is, you know, issues with drugs. We call in peer services. Now, we do have a lot of organizations, and we're doing our best to work better, but I think COVID has also proven that many times we work in silos, but y'all, those gaps are narrowing as to how we're now working together to help. When we talk about that young lady who was in her car, we got her out of her car, not just with youth and young adult, we pulled in general assistance. And now that young lady has a full-time job. I just want to throw that out there too. So those are just some of the programs and services. And like I said, I can go on and on, but those aren't the ones that I want to tout all the time. I want to think about those that we aren't able to reach. Because sometimes that's the obvious. I mean, that's the elephant in the room, that we don't always get it, you know, where we need to get it, when we need to get it. So, you know, but I hope that answers your question, Maureen.
And Audrey, can I just follow up and say one thing?
Hey, y'all, I've got to, Jeremy's going to come and take my seat. I'm going to take a COVID test, because in order for me to continue doing home visits, I got to make sure I'm COVID free. I have to do this every week. Okay. So I am running out to get they're right out here. They come here to give me a COVID test, and I will be right back.
Okay. Thank you, Audrey.
I was just going to say what's equally important to understand is that some of the time we're not going to, some of the time, let's say an officer is dispatched to a car, so on and so forth. Sometimes based on that officer's discretion, sometime our approach or our connection to that call is going to come afterwards. And that's just how it's going to be. But I think that's equally important as well. And then that's when the horizontal communication needs to take place. And that way outreach can then take it from there. Once the officer deems this is not really serious, but this person just needs some supports or needs to be connected to some resources, that communication needs to take place. And that is equally as important as well as an alternative. And I think that should be highlighted as well. Sometimes it will come afterwards, but you know, that's not such a bad thing always either.
Right, thank you. Other questions or comments from the committee? Yeah. Anybody? Cicely, how are you doing there? We can't hear you if you're trying to say something to us.
I'm sorry, thank you. I said I'm doing well. I think that adds in, you know, another kind of puzzle piece as we're gathering information and trying to move towards, you know, the program design model coming up, you know, pretty soon here. So I think that was enough information for me. I mean, the committee, if you all don't have any more questions, I think we can probably, you know, wrap it up. We have our next couple meeting topics lined up, and then we can start kind of reflecting and trying to, you know, design what we think is going to be, you know, a viable option, and go back to Human Services Committee.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's certainly a lot of resources in our community, and I think, yeah, our challenge is going to be, you know, weaving them all together along with whatever the new program is that we're contemplating. So this conversation, this information has been really, really helpful. So any last words from anybody else before we say goodbye and see you all next week?
Well, actually, we're not meeting next week because it's the
right.
holiday.
Sorry. Okay. 2 weeks now. Right.
Yeah,
thank you for that reminder. Yes, Norman.
No worries. May I just leave you with one thing? And it was back to, and I forgot to mention this when you talked about skill sets. One thing I would like to say is that sometimes I often encounter individuals in the community, and sometimes even in the organization, that some people feel like, well, they could just roll out of bed and do street outreach. But it's so much more complex than that. And what I mean is, it takes a certain individual, it takes a certain skill set to be able to foster these sort of relationships with individuals in the community, one built specifically on authenticity. And so I just think as you guys look for individuals, or as you encounter individuals who want to do this work or are trying to do this work, it takes a very, very unique skill set to weave in between friend, mentor, sometimes father figure. It takes a really, really unique skill set to be able to do that. And while it's important for individuals to have some similarities of the plight that the client or the individual in the community faces, you can't have an individual too close to those things as well, is one thing that I've learned through this work. And as you know, Alderman Ravel, I've been doing this for almost a decade. And I just think that that's really, really important to understand. And again, I'm fortunate to have both formal education as well as empirical knowledge as far as my expertise goes, but it just can't lean in one direction either. It has to be very, very interdisciplined and unorthodox. And so I just wanted to throw that out there as you guys look at individuals or work with individuals, because it's very important.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you've given us a lot of food for thought, and we really appreciate everything you had to share with us today. So thank you all to everyone, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
Bye.
Bye.